I appreciate you facilitating this question. Minister, as you know, up until 2012 there was a substantial specific funding stream for the local improvement scheme, unfortunately, that ceased at that time. As we know, the local improvement scheme provides for the upgrading of more minor local roads, which are particularly important for rural communities. At present, there is a huge backlog of such roads in most counties needing urgent attention. There is a limited scheme at present, but what we need is a substantial investment by the line department on an annual basis to ensure that this backlog is eliminated as soon as possible. Thank you, Oireachtas.
Minister. Thanks, Deputy.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Smith. Since the 2008 recession, a significant backlog of works on regional and local roads has built up, as you say, in all local authority jurisdictions across the country. The estimated cost of the backlog is in excess of €5 billion. For this reason, grant assistance from the Department continues to be focused on the protection and renewal of the public road network. It bears restating that the public regional road network is over 96,000 kilometres in size, and while there has been significant increases in grant funding in recent years, it has not been possible to address the backlog of works across the country, even with 90% of available funds being directed to protection and renewal works. For this reason, and in view of the funding being provided under a local improvement scheme by the Department of Rural and Community Development, I consider that I need to continue to concentrate funding on public roads. If I were to consider allocating funding for non-public roads, this would reduce the funding available for public roads. In this context, one initiative taken since the Department of Rural and Community Development's introduction of a local improvement scheme is the provision by my department of ring-fenced funding for the Community Involvement Scheme. This scheme is designed to provide for the repair of more lightly tracked public rural roads, which tend to be considered only towards the end of local road authorities' annual roadworks programmes. Under this scheme, €29 million approximately was paid to local authorities over the two-year period from 2020 to 2021, and this year's grant included funding of a further €15.2 million for that community scheme. All available grant funding for 2022 has been allocated. There was an increased allocation, recognising that this investment in our local roads is important for safety, for rural connectivity, for saving money in the long run, because if you let them go, it's much more expensive to get them back. But it was on that basis that we are allocating the funding.
Thank you, Oireachtas. I thank the Minister for his reply. Minister, the reply prepared by the Department is somewhat inaccurate in that the backlog does not go back to 2008. It began in 2012, and you and I were members of a government up to 2011 that provided very substantial funding for the local improvement scheme. Minister, I agree with you that we need huge investment in a regional and local network. And when you met Fianna Fáil Oireachtas members with myself, you may recall that I highlighted at that time the need to keep investment in the non-national road network to ensure that we didn't lose the investment that had already been put in. But at the same time, Minister, there are many laneways and local roads that I know that there are 10 or 12 families living along, people of all age groups, people who thankfully have come back to live in their own local community. In many of these areas, we have the infrastructure in place, be it schools, sporting facilities, the social infrastructure. I now would have queries from people who want to move back to rural Ireland. They'll ask me, Brendan, is there any chance of the road that I have a site along that I want to go back to live in my own home place? Is there any chance that that road would be brought up to an acceptable and appropriate standard for those people who are paying their tax, the same as the people living in the urban areas who have good road surfaces, footpaths and public lighting? These people are being denied a proper road surface to their homes, which is not acceptable, Minister, and you would agree with me on that, I'm sure. Thank you, Oireachtas.
You're welcome.
No, I'd agree, and you're right, going back to 2008, and that government did a lot with very difficult times and very stretched funding, and did prioritise into that investment, as you said. We need to do the similar, particularly this moment in post-COVID, when there is a chance to see a revival of rural Ireland. Except that means we have to fund the new Connecting Ireland rural public transport system, which is, I think, going to be a huge benefit and help people in rural Ireland. That's why we did increase the funding for local roads and make sure we maintained the funding for public road maintenance, because if we let that go, then it costs a lot more to bring it back. That's why the Minister for Rural and Community Development doubled doubled the funding for the local improvement scheme under her budget allocation in 2021, providing an additional 10.5 million up to 21 million funding. So it's not that there's no recognition of the importance of rural connectivity. It's those three measures: bus services, public roads, and through Minister Humphreys, that local improvement scheme funding.
Deputy Smith.
Thank you, Clearly. Thank you, Minister. Minister, I welcome funding that has been provided through the Department of Rural and Community Development. But in the past, Minister, you will recall that when the Community and Rural Development Department had a CLAR programme, it used to be a top-up to the line department's funding. Minister, the people whom I'm talking about, they're living down small local roads that no public transport will be going, but they're entitled to a proper standard of road to their own homes. And again, policy is contradictory. We want people out of the major urban areas. We want less pressure on housing in our major cities, major towns. We have the infrastructure, by and large, in place in rural Ireland. With a relatively small investment, that important road network can be brought up to a proper standard. And Minister, would you happen to recall what capital funding in 2021 did your department not draw down? If there is an underspend on the capital side in your department during the course of this year, then it should be reallocated to councils, say, and allocated specifically for a local improvement scheme, and you would see huge value for government investment. Minister, I will appeal to you again to look at this particular needs of rural communities of all age groups. Thank you, Cahirley.
Minister, to conclude.
Yeah, to conclude, and I should have mentioned in my last response that, of course, there is also, as I said in my earlier first response, our department's investment in the community involvement schemes. And since the introduction of that ring-fence funding for community investment schemes in 2018, there has been a significant increase, with funding allocation in two-year tranches. 14.3 million approximately was paid to local authorities for the community scheme last year. A new round of funding is starting this year for the 2022-23 period. While the community contributions in the range to 15 to 30% had been required previously, depending on the mix of works and monies, the contribution rate has now been reduced to a minimum of 10% for monetary contributions and 20% for work contributions. That mechanism, it's not that our department doesn't have any involvement, it's through that mechanism, as well as the Department of Rural Affairs, as well as what we spend on public roads, as well as the money new money we're going to spend in rural bus connectivity, I hope we'll attract those people back,
Thanks,
as you said, are thinking of coming back to live in rural Ireland.
Can you give me a commitment that you and your department colleagues will be doing analysis of the capital spend throughout the year? If there is a slowness in drawing down some of the capital funding under any particular heading, will you give due consideration to providing funding that's not drawn down by other sections to the road section specifically for local improvement scheme? Thank you, Cahirley.
We constantly look at that, and there was an underspend, largely because of COVID last year. And unfortunately, a lot of the underspend, it's never been in the roads programme. We have a machine for building and spending roads. The underinvestment has been in the public transport and in the active travel.
All right.
And I do believe, I think particularly for rural Ireland, if I do have that underspend, my mind, it's in the rural public transport is where I'd like to really focus the funding.
Thanks for your patience.